You are live. Yes, we are. Welcome to Tuned Into Tennis. I'm your host, Miles David, and we are about to talk about all things day 9 of the Championships Wimbledon 2024. We are right smack dab in the middle of quarterfinal stage. We've had some quarterfinals become completed today, so we know who our half of our semifinal lineup is, and we have some quarterfinals to look forward to for tomorrow. And to help me digest and look forward and kind of analyze all of that is friend to the show, Xavier. Welcome back, Xavier. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me again. It's always a pleasure to talk tennis with you.
Yeah, and I feel like I've broken the midweek Australian Open curse that we've had running for a couple of years.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Essence Fest is I understand.
Oh yeah, I did tell you Essence Fest. Yeah, I wasn't even supposed to be down in New Orleans this past weekend, but I kind of got drug out. But I'm happy I did because my birthday is this weekend, and it kind of kicked off what should be a good week as I celebrate. So,
Well, let me
uh,
be amongst those to wish you a happy birthday.
thank you. I appreciate it. I'm a step further into the decade we call the 30s. So, well, I will be on Saturday the 13th, which is coincidentally the same day as the women's final, which I'm a little apprehensive about now, given who our remaining women are in the draw that could be competing on that final. There are some situations in which that could go right. There are some situations in which that could go very left. So I'm taking it day by day and keeping my fingers crossed that I have as entertaining and fulfilling for my fan needs Wimbledon ladies singles final as possible. So uh we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And if anybody's wondering like why I look weird, it's because one, I have my glasses on and I typically don't come on camera with my glasses on. But like Xavier mentioned, Essence Fest weekend was fun and my eyes are a little irritated and red, and I haven't been able to figure out how to adjust that yet. So this is what you get. All right, let's get tuned into and talking some tennis. The headlines over day 9. Let's just start with which I think you would agree is the biggest one as far as like the results wise that a lot of people would say they didn't see coming, and that would be Daniil Medvedev upsetting number 1 seed and current world number 1 Yannick Sinner to return back to the Wimbledon semifinals for the second year running and snap a streak of 5 straight losses to Sinner. And he finds himself, like I said, back into Wimbledon semifinal. How do you, Xavier? How did you see that match going, and how different of the result? Like, where do you find yourself in digesting all of this?
Yeah, I mean, look, I thought Medvedev had been actually playing a lot better recently. And I thought he played a lot better even to get himself into this quarterfinal match. But to be honest with you, this was definitely well, there's one other match that was played today, but this was definitely probably the biggest gap between what my expectations of the result were going to be and what the result actually ended up being. I really thought Center would take care of this in 4 sets at the most, honestly.
Hmm.
He's enjoyed that head-to-head advantage. I thought that the faster, slicker, kind of indoor grass court situation would really suit Center very well. I thought he'd hit through the court really well. He seemed to regress a little. He seemed to go back to that thing of just hitting the ball really hard and very linearly. Um, and I felt like he was getting involved in I don't know, too many long rallies, not really willing to come to the net enough. Um,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I don't know if you saw the stats for that match. It was perplexing when I looked them over. Center had more winners, fewer unforced errors. Um, they were even in break points. They each took 3. Center won more points. Um, when you look at the stats, you're like, how did Medvedev win this match? And I think
Yeah.
that's what I'm a little perplexed by. First serve percentage was higher. Like, the statistics don't really show what happened in the match, but I do think there were 3 tie breaks or 2 in that. I'm sorry, I just the score line.
The first set, no, the first set was actually a
Oh,
tie break. That I know for sure. Um,
Yeah,
actually let me
there
say
were
the score. It
there
was
were
7-6, 4-6, 7-6, two tiebreaks. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, in a tiebreak, anything can happen, and that maybe accounts for some of the the sort of funky nature of the stats. But I think it gets into how fun and strange of a sport we have with our scoring system with tennis that you can dominate the stats, win more points, yet lose the match. you know.
Mm. But that, to me, that kind of spells out a little bit of Daniel Medvedev's play style and career. He's been unassuming for the most part, especially in this stretch since he won his US Open title. I didn't necessarily leave if I go back to like what I was thinking after that 2021 US Open victory. I didn't think that he would just go and like run the table, but I definitely didn't think we'd be sitting here at 2024 with him only having that one. And there's been some incidences where I feel like he's played well up until a certain point in a tournament or even within a match, but doesn't actually leave with that match victory or the championship. Going back to Australian Open 2022 against Rafa, even this year against Sinner in the Australian Open, he started off so well. And I guess if you look at the larger scope and like maybe try to have a judgment of who played the best tennis for longer, it may I could see the argument saying that Medvedev played better in that final, but he didn't play the long game the best like Sinner did. And in this instance, it was a little bit reversed, but I also think it was aided by the fact that Sinner did look a little gassed, under the weather, and pale, as they kept calling him. He already is a paler guy, especially with the ginger hair. Kind of that juxtaposition makes him look more pale. But he did look like, not like he was about to hurl over and puke like he did back in Beijing, but he did look like maybe he had eaten something sour and it was still lingering with him, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was kind of I didn't really notice it until, the second set, even though I had been watching the first set pretty closely. He seemed fine in the first set, but by the second
Hmm.
set, you could kinda see, okay. I mean, he did look a little paler now that you mention it than usual, but he was looking all right, and I really thought, "Oh, okay, he's doing fine. This is an entertaining match," but it was giving me entertaining match that's close, but Sinner is just gonna be the better, at the end, right? But
Hmm.
then in the second set, it became very clear that something was going on, and I couldn't tell whether it was, like, muscular or skeletal or whether it was kind of like that kinda like I have a cold or,
Hmm.
I ate something really bad type illness, right? And it started to look it was just weird. At different times, it felt like it was literally affecting him physically, but he was saying that he was dizzy. And they had to kind of hold him as they were like taking him off the court to do more
Hmm.
evaluation. I mean, let me be clear, they weren't literally holding him up,
He
but
wasn't on a stretcher.
yeah, yeah, but that it was clear. You know how when you have an elderly parent or grandparent and you kind of just are being careful, you want to make sure that you kind of hold on to them as they're walking, right?
Hmm.
That's kind of what it was giving, right?
Hmm.
And I heard that he didn't really make much of it. He just said he wasn't feeling well today, but he wasn't very clear about what the nature of that not feeling well was. And so,
Hmm.
like he said, he woke up just not feeling well today. Is what I saw as far as the press conference. I'm sure there's some people who've looked more deeply at that who may have more information, but yeah,
I'm
he
looking
was
for a
clearly,
picture of him where he looked kind of pale.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he clearly wasn't 100%. So,
Hmm.
I think it's one of those things where I don't know what to take out of that about Medvedev's level, right? Because even a reduced center still took him to 5 sets, right? It wasn't like Medvedev wanted in 3 or 4. So, yeah, yeah.
Do you think that has something to do with the fact that Yannick Sinner has just kind of been in his groove all year, and like that helped, like you said, it wasn't that Sinner was ailing to the point where Medvedev was kind of sweeping him off the court. And I think that is a testament to just how good Yannick Sinner's level has been all season. That he could kind of go on court and maybe even pick up something in the middle of that match and still feel less than 100% and still have a top 5 seed like in the battle going to a fifth set, losing 6-3 in the third eventually. I I still think that there are some instances that like, and this is not to like say that Yannick Sinner is a perfect player, but he is pretty darn close. There are still some instances that have happened in his career that have not been that far away. Where I worry about his body, especially endurance and stamina wise, because we've seen like when he is hitting on all cylinders, there's not a shot really in the book that he can't execute and execute very well at the very highest level. But if I go back to Zverev at the US Open 2023, those were very humid conditions. But unfortunately, we live in this era where global warming is just not slowing up. So that it seems like there's going to continuously be predicaments where players' bodies are tested, and Yannick Sinner hasn't always passed the test. Um, and it concerns me just a little because that whole combination I just said right there, I don't think I'd ever audibly said it, that like tennis is getting more physical because they're playing in more physical conditions. The world is hotter. Like the world is hotter, the points are longer. In Yannick Sinner, we've seen him tap out and literally puke sometimes. Does he win? Sometimes he does, but sometimes he kind of comes up short. And I wonder if that's going to I wonder in general how that's going to affect him. How do you like deal with all of that when it comes to Sinner?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good thing for Sinner, and I guess my takeaway from that is that, yeah, his 5-set record isn't great, right? Like,
Mm,
and increasingly it's feeling like if you can just get him in a fifth set, like, I mean, that would literally be my approach to playing Sinner in a slam.
keep him out there.
Just keep the dude out there, right? Like, because I
Yeah.
feel like if I can get him into a fifth set, he seems to physically wilt. We saw it at the French Open against Carlos. We saw it against Zverev in the US Open. So look, I think that is a concern. I think that the flip side of that though is if he has a poor 5-set record because physically he's still needing to figure some things out, I
Hmm.
I think that's a little bit better for his long-term prospects because at least you can do something about that, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
I think it's a little harder to overcome a mental frailty, right? That one might have, right? Like I would argue that someone like Zverev has a mental frailty when it comes to best of five, right? Like the game
Hmm.
is there. Um, and generally he seems to be quite fit and sturdy through 5 sets, but there's something going on up here, right?
Gotcha.
That's not
Yeah.
working for him. And I'm not sure he's ever gonna figure that out. Whereas I think with Sinner, we've seen that he's been able to overcome certain mental and hurdles before. Like he used to be a bit of a I mean, I wouldn't call it choker, but there were he used to have a bit of a reputation for like not being able to close,
He
right?
would he would lose some tight ones.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
For not being able to close, for not being able to kind of finish matches off when he seemingly had the momentum, right?
Hmm.
And I think he's overcome that. So I feel like when I'm looking at the losses, I'm not looking at the losses recently as tactical errors or somebody who doesn't seem to mentally be able to kind of emotionally and mentally keep it together. This is someone who seemingly is suffering physically and is not able to perform at his highest level physically. Frankly, a bit like Runa, honestly, at this point.
Mm.
And I do think that that's something you can work on. You can work with your physio and trainer on building up the body, and I think he's been doing that, right? I
Is
mean,
he
like
gonna have to cut out gluten? Like everybody else that we know.
I don't know if an Italian can quite do that, but, even one that's a Germanic Italian is probably still eating a ton of gluten. So, I'm gonna say no for that, but I mean, I do think that he and his team will need to work on I mean, look, it's gonna have to be one or two things, either finishing off these matches quicker,
Being more
or
efficient. Yeah.
yeah, being more efficient, or, building up his bodily stamina so that he can manage, what is likely to be the latter ends, which are gonna be at least 4 set, if not 5 set matches against the other top players.
Mm.
And so, he and his team, I think, are gonna have to figure that out. I think your concern is noted. I think his record in 5 set is not great. I think I heard a statistic that it was something like 2-6, okay,
Mm.
that's
In
way too.
my mind goes to the ones that he's lost more so than the ones he's won. But he won the most important one against Medvedev at
And I think,
Australia. So
although interestingly, and I know that there's a lot of controversy around that match, around
mhm,
like whether Medvedev's inability to keep up with the net rushing and the sort of great play that he had in the first 2 sets was a mental or a physical thing, or a little bit of both. But I do
mhm,
think, interestingly enough, in that one very famous 5 set match that he won, it was his
mhm.
opponent that seemed to run out of
Yes, yes.
vitality.
It's interesting how like there's this juxtaposition between Medvedev and Sinner about physical stamina. Because when you were speaking just now about like Sinner's issues, my mind went back to Miami of last year where we saw Sinner run to the final and just completely run out of gas against Medvedev, who looked like he could be out there for 17 more hours. And then we fast forward to now and it's flipped. And it's interesting because they kind of when Sinner first came on to the tour, he kind of had a build similar to Medvedev. You can tell that he's put on a little bit more lbs and more muscle, but not to the point where he's like some, glaring musclehead. So there, I think at its core, Sinner still has a lot of similarities to the Medvedev game. So I feel like now that I've talked about it, I'm kind of way more interested than I've ever have been on where that rivalry goes now, because we've had a period where Medvedev dominates, we've had a period where Sinner dominates, and now Medvedev has started to flip the coin in this latest matchup. So who knows what's going to happen in the next one? But I do hope that Sinner figures out what needs to be happening in his regimen so that like his I don't know, immune system, his body can feel like it can stand the rigors of the tour. But with that being said, it is difficult. Like these players are playing week in, week out, different time zones, different nutrition all around them from every given week. So it is tough, but it's not. There have been people that have done it. So like there's something to tap into, and I would like to see Center tap into that. But all things considered, literally the world number one player will leave Wimbledon, the world number one player, and that is 3 Wimbledons in a row. He's made the quarterfinals or better. So I don't think he should leave here, as the picture on the screen would show, as perplexed and kind of down on himself, because he did lose in the fifth set to a player who's been to the semifinals just last year at Wimbledon, and he put up a good fight, all things considered. So,
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, at this point, they both have the same number of slams.
oh
And
yeah,
Medvedev has been in far more. I know it's hard to think, because you think that
yeah,
someone's won like 5 of them just because of
hmm
how dominant he's been this year. But truth be told, he has the same number of slams as Medvedev, right? And
mm,
Medvedev way more finals. Obviously, Medvedev older, more experienced. I just wanted to take note that someone who was watching just mentioned that in his Italian press conference, he spoke about allergies. So
hmm.
I'm just wondering if it was allergies. I could also see a situation where you're taking something to try to deal with them, and it kind of
It
not
can,
it can
yeah, it can make you a little laggy
yeah,
or
yeah,
lethargic. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I could totally see that, especially if there's pollen in the air and the
Hmm.
humidity is kicking things up and the roof is closed. I mean, on a side note, I'll just save more for this for the end, but I'm just not as huge of a fan as I thought I would be of indoor grass tennis. There's something about it that's not doing it for me. It feels dangerous. The players are just slicking,
Ah,
sliding everywhere. And I also think that it leads to fewer point construction and more serve bodying. But we'll chat about that later. But I do think that, I do think tennis will need to think about moving forward, maybe some shifts to the calendar to deal with global warming. Like, I think at
Mhm.
this point, maybe you can hold Wimbledon a little earlier or a little later in the year. Maybe you
Mhm.
can hold like, I think now at this point, you could probably realistically hold the US Open in October.
I was just about to
Y
say the
you
US
know?
Open could go after Labor Day, like start
Yeah.
after Labor Day. It is cool that it's like you can kind of mold those things together. Labor Day fun and tennis fun in New York, but like it could go late. It could start late September instead of late August. I
Yeah,
think that's possible.
and I get the reason why they do it the way they do it, right? Like back in the day before we had the No Child Left Behind and all that stuff, like kids didn't normally start school until after Labor
Mm,
Day, right? Like that
hmm.
used to be traditional. I remember when I was growing up, we didn't start school until after Labor Day, right? And
Wow.
and if we did start before Labor Day was just to deal with that Monday that you had off for it. So you might have like a day
Hmm.
of class right before Labor Day. But yeah, so I get that there's a reason for why they like the US Open is where it is. It's also strategically placed, I think, to not compete with the NFL, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, there are issues if you push it back around NFL scheduling and things like that. But I do wonder, right, if we're not going to basically turn our sport to an indoor sport, um,
Mm.
where basically all the slams are de facto indoor tournaments, because of the sort of variability of the weather that we have now. I do wonder if there might be some conversation about shifting these dates around to more amenable weather conditions, but, you know
Well, the weather conditions at Wimbledon this year have not been kind, and thank goodness we do have that roof
Oh, yeah,
because
totally.
the last 6 days have been just wet, like pure wet. And even so, that the mixed doubles and doubles, ladies doubles and gentlemen doubles, are completely backed up because those are usually regulated to outside courts that don't have a roof at all. But I do think that court number one used its roof today and in good fashion for the Carlos Alcaraz and Tommy Paul match. It was in play during that match for most of it, correct?
Yeah, yeah, no, I think all of the matches today were under the roof.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, it's basically become an indoor grass tournament, and I think those are different conditions.
Isn't that kind of like Halle?
Basically, yeah, yeah, to some extent. So,
And Sinner won that. So yeah, tennis is strange. Isn't that something?
yeah, yeah, although someone took out Medvedev, who knows, maybe if Medvedev had stayed longer at Halle, that would have been a semifinal or final match,
Hmm.
because Medvedev got upset by somebody. I can't remember who it was in Halle. I can't remember who it was. I'll look it up
Struff?
real quick. It might have
No,
been Roof.
no,
Yeah.
because Struff played him. Who beat Medvedev in Halle?
I
You
am
know,
ch
the form on this app is about to tell me in 2.5 seconds,
Okay.
just so I can know. Medvedev lost to Zhang Zhizhen,
Okay, who was
who
having a
I
really
don't
good
I don't
week.
remember what Zhang Zhizhen did at Wimbledon. Now that we're in the second
He
week.
he ended up losing to, oh my gosh, it was someone good. Like, it was like, it was sad for him, but it was someone good, though.
Oh wait, the app is going to tell me that too. Look at us going down our, our pre-Wimbledon road. He lost to Jan Lennart Struff. Look at how that all came together.
Yeah.
Look at that. Look at that.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get tangential. We should get back to the tennis, but I do think that, and then it was another reason why I thought I would favor center was because I thought, well, with this sort of indoor conditions, it's basically playing like a really fast hard court in a certain
Hmm.
with a low bounce, right?
True.
And I thought that would, I thought that would favor, center in a lot of ways. So really
But
good.
Medvedev, good for center, but Medvedev, from the highlights and the really, really big, like kind of key swinging moments I saw, Medvedev was the aggressor. And that may have been because of center's paleness, or that could have been because Medvedev was like, hey, you can't win six straight against me. That's not gonna
Yeah.
happen.
I mean, the
Um,
one stat that Medvedev did beat Sinner on, which was surprising, was net approaches. He went to the net 41 times,
mm,
and won 27 of those points. So So he went to the net about 13, 14 more times than Sinner. So I definitely felt like there was a very concerted effort on the part of Medvedev to play a little more aggressively. I think to mix up his return position. I mean, he was coming up on that return a lot more than what I mean, he still would move back from time to time, but he was also varying that position. So it's clear that, I mean, I love to see this. Like, I love to see players make adjustments to their game to try to deal with the matchup problem that they have with a particular opponent, right?
Mhm.
Hint, Coco. But 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 I do, I love to see, a player like sit down there and think and craft a different plan, right? And
Mhm.
Medvedev did that, and so to his credit, you've got to appreciate the tennis mind that the guy has. And I know that he's not developing these strategies on his own, but still,
Mhm.
like he has to execute it. He has to have the skill set to do it. He has to also buy into it and believe it. And, for that, I think that's impressive, especially given that this is not a 21-year-old, right? This is,
Yeah.
someone in their late 20s making, adjustments to their game and tweaks to their game. And I really appreciate that as a fan.
He definitely can ebb in and out of my thoughts as one of my favorite players to watch and or listen to and kind of get into the minds of. But someone that usually stays at the very, very top is somebody that we can segue into, and that's Mr. Carlos Alcaraz, who booked his ticket into the semifinals for the second consecutive year running. And he beat Tommy Paul, who was coming in with a lot of confidence, honestly. It was probably some of the best tennis I've ever seen Tommy Paul play, having picked up the championship in Queens Club about 2 weeks ago. But Carlos Alcaraz dropped the first set 5-7, but went on to win pretty comfortably thereafter 6-4, 6-2, 6-2 to book his spot into the semis. And I am pleased as a fan that Carlos Alcaraz won that match because I think that just sets us up for an even more entertaining and kind of solidified entertaining final weekend. But I was a little disappointed that Tommy Paul didn't make that a more fun match for longer. Like it was fun, but I wish it would have been more 7-5 sets. But then, maybe as the Carlos Alcaraz fan that I can be, I would be kind of disappointed at that too. I don't know, but I was somewhere between expecting more, happy with what I got, but still expecting a little bit more. So Carlos moves on, and he's the favorite to take the title now. Maybe.
I mean, here's my take on that. I look, I think he'll figure out the Medvedev situation. I don't know if it'll be quite the dismantling that it was last year.
Hmm.
But I have a strong suspicion that he will. But at the same time, like Medvedev is turning into a bit of the disruptor, right? Like he disrupted the Alcaraz Djokovic US Open final that everybody wanted, right? Like
Hmm.
he disrupted, some things, and he's been a bit of a disruptor.
Hmm.
And so look, he's clearly made adjustments. I think though that I would say that he is absolutely the favorite to make the final. I still need to see Djokovic actually get tested properly
Oh boy, we might
or
not ever see that.
or I can, before I can say like I would make him the favorite, because my whole thing is that I feel like Djokovic has been able to make his way through this draw. And I'm sorry, I don't want to start talking about the next match too soon, but I'll just say he's made his way through the draw without too much strain, either mentally
Hmm.
or physically. And I just think that, given that he has the easier path, frankly, with all due respect to the people who are left, I just have a hard time imagining that he won't show up there extraordinarily fresh, extraordinarily motivated, and feeling like, the crowd is probably going to be very pro Carlos. I think it's a recipe for him to pull off one of his miracles. And so I would definitely say he is a slight I don't know if I'm comfortable enough calling him the favorite just yet with Djokovic still in the draw and kind of untested.
I think that could work in Alcaraz's favor and actually uh, throw off Djokovic if he does indeed get to the final. I'm not rooting for it, but if he does get to the final and it is Carlos Alcaraz that he faces yet again in a rematch of last year's final, I like the fact that Carlos Alcaraz has spent just enough time on court and has had some sets really fall his way dominantly, but has also been pushed and had to kind of elevate his game so that he feels more well-rounded coming into the final weekend. So in my mind, if Medvedev pushes him, if he drops a set or two sets, it's not going to be this shock to the system. If he gets to the final and whoever is in the final plays really, really well, whether it be Djokovic or Demon or who's in that bottom half, Fritz or Musetti, as we'll get on to,
Yeah.
even if they play some of the tennis of their life, he's already been pushed. He's not necessarily been on the cusp of leaving the tournament, but he's been pushed. And I like that sweet spot that Carlos Alcaraz is in. And I do think that he has his eyes on defending a Grand Slam a Grand Slam championship. And I mean, some of the greatest of the greats have done the Wimbledon defense one, two, or three times. And I think he wants to be in that number. And I think his coaching team seems like they're really gelled together at the moment to make that happen and have that be the main focus at the moment. So it's nice to see. I mean, I feel like he, especially in this Tommy Paul match, I feel like he played within himself. I haven't felt any moments where like I've had the general electricity feel that I feel when I watch Carlos Alcaraz, because you never really know what way he's going to ebb and flow, but he hasn't ebbed so far into the electricity where it's like, wow, like stop what you're doing on your phone, post that point, because we might never see anything like that again. He hasn't done that, which he has done before in his career, but his level also isn't, maybe where it was in Australia earlier this year, where we were like, wow, like what's really going on, because that conversation has started to happen. So I like the fact that he's somewhere in the middle and he's found himself getting the semifinal. So with all of that in mind, he's my favorite to take the title. I just hope that uh people in their menisci go home.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious as to what you think that how did this go wrong for Tommy Paul? I saw the first set and
Hmm.
I thought I thought Alcaraz let him off the hook a little, right? I thought Tommy Paul was playing really, really well, but I was a little surprised that he got broken and that in that final game to kind of give away that set. I mean, Paul was playing amazing. I didn't get to see the end of the match, so I'm curious about like in your estimation where things went wrong. I mean, I saw on the stat sheet that the unforced errors were crazy, but I also get
Hmm.
that like the plan and the game plan was take it to Carlos and really go for it. So I don't know if like you sensed that he was kind of just spraying balls everywhere or if he just was kind of forced into like the game plan was to play aggressively and it didn't just quite work out. I'm curious as to where you felt maybe the train got derailed a little bit because I would agree with you. The four set result is not the surprise. I think just the way that the match seemingly became a bit of a non-event after the first
Hmm.
half
Hmm.
was a
Yeah,
little more of the surprise.
I think Tommy Paul, as loose and fluid as he is, and how that can work in his favor, I think it can also work against him. I feel like losing that first set made Alcaraz zone in even more on what he had to do to get himself out of that hole. And I don't think Tommy Paul was able, or maybe controversially, doesn't have that ability to click in as naturally as Carlos Alcaraz does. And having watched Tommy Paul a lot earlier this year when I went to Dallas and Delray, that fluidity serves its purpose when he's playing somebody that doesn't have as many gears to shift into like Carlos Alcaraz does. But if he plays somebody like Carlos Alcaraz, he can give him hell. And actually, if Carlos Alcaraz is not up to the task on the day, we've seen Tommy Paul beat him, but that wasn't the case today, especially with the stakes on the line of it being another Wimbledon semifinal. Carlos, with the help of his team and just his general championship mindset now that we can firmly say that he has, the three-time Grand Slam champion, was able to go somewhere mentally and with his game that Tommy Paul really couldn't follow. And I believe this was their first time playing at a slam. And I think that
Yes.
all kind of culminated to what we saw Tommy Paul showcase in those last three sets. It was like, uh-oh, like I know I've been playing well, but this is a guy that has been eating people like me up for lunch. And he kind of just he didn't stump his shoulders, but it was just enough to have Carlos pounce on him. And then after that, it was kind of like that was game set and match, you know?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was curious about that. I mean, look, he's also trying to do the Channel Slam, which, outside of, the big three, really just, outside of Djokovic's recent um doing it in 2021, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't been done in a while. So I mean, it's a hard thing to do, right? To get a little Mariah. Not everybody has that. You know, but but yeah, I think that it'll be really interesting. I mean, look, in my heart of heart, I'm a huge Alcaraz fan, and I just love what he's bringing to the sport, and I think he's elevating the sport and requiring his contemporaries and his colleagues to get better, right? Like I feel like the entire sport is being elevated, by this one guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's forcing people to get better if they want to compete and be there. And so look, I'd love to see him pull this off. The draw didn't do him any favors, but maybe it's one of those like Serena type draws where it hardens the person, and
Mm-hmm.
by the time they get to the final, because Serena would had to go through so many murderers rows, only to
Yeah. They didn't really give her a Djokovic draw too often.
no, no. I mean, I will say there were some moments later in the career where the draws got a little softer for her, but
Mm-hmm.
generally she had some really rough draws, but it seemed like what is that, like the fire forged, and the
Mm-hmm.
steel forges fire, whatever, you know what I'm saying? But like it
Mm-hmm.
seemed to battle her, and bring out her competitive juices. And I see the same thing happening with Alcaraz. I would argue this was probably his best match that he played, given both the occasion and the caliber of the opponent. So this is someone who seemingly is getting better and better with each round.
Would agree. Hard agree. Do you think, as we switch gears to some of the women's quarterfinals matchups today, do you think who do I want to go with first? Let's go with Donna Vekic.
Mhm.
Donna Vekic has found herself into her very first Grand Slam semifinal after over 10 years on tour. Fun fact, her first WTA tour level final that she competed in was in 2012. I wasn't even like I knew it was early 2010s, but I didn't know it was 2012. So to do that math in my head to see how long she's been on tour and only just turned 28 last month in June, she reaches her first Grand Slam final. Do you think she has somebody that has kind of benefited from the ebbs and flows of being and experiencing life on tour and now is a better player because of it? Do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can see that, in her, right? I mean, like I think that there's an appreciation for the sport because of all the injuries that she's had to battle through and come back from. And I think that there's an approach that she has. And I don't know if you saw anything from her, like on court interview and press conferences, but she literally said that she was in such a low state right before the French Open that she was actually going to take a mental health break.
I did
You
see that. Yeah.
know, because she just was like, she felt like she had been working her butt off all year and she just wasn't having the results, and her ranking had declined significantly by the time she got to the French Open.
To
So
the point where she's not even seated at this
yeah,
Wimbledon.
she's not even seated anymore,
Yeah.
right? So I think I'm always happy with the kind of like experienced veteran who just catches something in the bottle and it all comes together for them. And whether this is look, whether this turns into something for her, and
Hmm.
I was about to make a snarky comment about her having a career similar to her ex-boyfriend, maybe, but I'm not gonna do that. But I just thought, it would be similar to Stan.
If you know, you know.
Yeah, it would be similar to a certain someone who won his first Grand Slam title in his late 20s,
Hmm.
and then went on to win a couple more.
Yeah.
So look, I love this for her, and I do think that I will say that I do believe that she's one of those that's benefited from the indoor conditions a lot.
Well,
Um,
did
uh,
she? How many matches has she actually played besides this one against Lulu's son, the
mm,
qualifier? A,
oh
a lot
yeah,
of her
you're
matches were
right. A lot
actually
of her matches have actually
outdoors.
been in the outer courts. You're right about that. You're right about
Yeah.
that. Because I saw her like striking that ball the way she was the last couple of sets. And I was like, that this woman doesn't have all the indoor titles. I'm just like, like it's like it was so effective. Her serve was so effective, that flat ground strokes that she has. But she added a little things to her game that I didn't know she had. Like there was definitely more net play than I'm used to seeing from her. And in addition to that, there was also a really great use of the drop shot, which is perfect for her because she's always belting the ball so hard
Hmm.
that when she pulls it out, it's always a surprise because you're always on your back foot waiting for her to throttle the ball at you, right? And then she just pulls out a great drop shot. So look, she's playing well. She's clearly hit a patch of tennis. She seems like like she's really had to overcome a lot to get to this point.
Hmm.
It would be a wonderful story if she were even just to make the final, much less win. And I'm definitely rooting for her. Maybe not as much as Paulini, just because I just love to see her do it. Like, like
Uh-huh.
who had her like in
Right.
the like I don't think people were thinking.
Breakout 2024 season. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Paulini didn't necessarily fit the bill, but I'm glad she's in it.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing was, I just thought like, okay, that was a cute little run to the French Open final, but I certainly wasn't thinking, I just wasn't thinking that grass would do
Would
this.
be the one.
Yeah, but
But
now that I think about it,
before we get into Paulini, I do want your thoughts on something I put out on Twitter. Do you
okay.
see this? Do you see this picture of Vekic here?
Yes, yes.
Are you following me in the thought process that she's giving a little bit of Nicole Vidasova, or is that just me?
I could see that. I remember you were such a Nicole Vitasova fan.
Kind of still am. If there was an option to like get Virtua Tennis 3 or one of the throwback top spins on the newer things, I would be playing with Nicole Vidasova still. There was just something about her game that I still love diving into old throwback YouTube videos for.
I could totally see that. I remember Vitasova. There's definitely a Vitasova-ish quality to Vekic. Absolutely. Even I'm even thinking a little bit of her mentor, Eva Maioli. There's a little of her in there too. The way that Maioli
Mm.
played really powerful tennis, kind of
Any
kind of hit him
any
off the court.
any Pam Shriver, her current
No,
head
Pam was
coach to
such
the
a
system?
no. I mean, what I do think Pam has brought is the net game and a little bit of the touch, right? That
Hmm.
like Bečić didn't have that. That wasn't a part of her game as far as I can tell. Previously. So, there's that element, but no, Pam was so like a Vondrosova type, person,
Uh,
like she served and volleyed. She came to the net a lot. She didn't hit with a ton. She had a big serve because she was tall, but she wasn't like ripping the ball with a ton of power, really, from what I remembered. It was much more of a touch oriented game and getting herself to the net. And but I could be wrong about that though, because
I mean, maybe Pam Shriver is just elevated Donna Vekic's ability to kind of feel the ball a little bit more, because there were some moments where she kind of cut under that backhand and made it a dropper where it looked like it was going to be a drive backhand ground stroke. That Pam might have, and I don't know for sure, but Pam might have been like, let's add a little bit more touch and guile and see how that goes for this grass season. So
oh,
I actually like
absolutely.
that. I like that partnership. I like it a lot, actually.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very clear that she's added an element of touch to her game that just was not there before. And I have to imagine that's Pam's influence.
Go Pam. Go Pam. Let's go back to another person who has been influencing my thoughts about tennis recently, and that is Miss Jasmine Paolini, because there's something so joyous about watching her, especially this year. I've always, I shouldn't say always, I actually should not even lie like that. I don't think I knew who Jasmine Paolini was 3 years ago. Like maybe 2021 is when I started, and I have to give a lot of credit to my friends at Black Spin Global for making me aware that Jasmine Paolini, one, was a tennis player, and two, had African descent, because I think her mother is from Ghana with Polish descent. I'm still a little flummoxed.
Yeah, no, her
Uh,
grandfather is Ghanaian, her grandmother is Polish
gotcha.
on her maternal side, on her mother's side.
Gotcha. So she has a mix of a whole bunch of different cultural backgrounds, which makes her even more interesting. But take all of that aside, right? Her game, and you can see it here with a smile on her face, she plays tennis with a mixture of passion and joy, but also damn good ball striking that I don't think I would have expected to see if I watched her 2 years ago and watched her now. I don't think I would have expected it to elevate to that much, but it has, and she finds herself in back-to-back semifinals now after beating Emma Navarro in the most one-sided match of the day. She beat Emma Navarro. What was the score? It was 6-2, 6-1 in under an hour. And that's interesting because their head-to-head coming in was not indicative of something like that was going to happen. I believe Emma Navarro and Jasmine Paolini have played a couple times this year. Yes, twice this year, in fact. And Navarro won both of those, and they were a lot tighter. One even went to 3 sets. So I was impressed to say the least, and I just continue to be impressed with Paolini because she struts onto the court with her stuff and shows it. Even in the final against Iga Swiatek, it didn't seem like it was a huge bruise to her ego, even though it was such a one-sided match. And I didn't expect her to come from Wimbledon after that phenomenal run, get to Wimbledon, a grass court surface in a tournament that she had never actually picked up a win at, and find herself in the semifinals and still inject the pace and direction and ball striking into her game all in one into that small 5-3 package. So how are you feeling about Miss Jasmine Paolini at the moment?
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. I'll start with her kind of joyousness on the court because I think she brings you in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she makes you feel the joy that she has, right? Like I almost feel like I'm discovering tennis again with her.
Yes.
Right. It's that weird thing like when parents or grandparents talk about when, a baby is born and they kind of re-experience the world, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that through that child's eyes, right? And I feel like for someone like me who's been watching tennis for so long, she's just made me kind of, re-experience things and like kind of view the world a little differently or view tennis a little differently with her. And I love it. And she's playing with a kind of joyous infection that I used to associate with TFO, you know, um,
Mm. Mm.
back in 2022 and early 2023, first half of 2023, right? Like there's this, this joyousness which would he would play and he would kind of bring you into that fun that he was having, right? That's no longer the case, but she seems to have picked up that baton on the women's side at least. There's just a really beautiful it's just a joy to watch her. She doesn't seem to take anything for granted. She's going to fight for every point. She's going to give you everything that she's got. There's nothing lackadaisical about her at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she gives you just enough energy and personality without it being a little too over the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a lot of appreciation for what she's done. I will also just say that secondarily, it's also very clear that there's been an upping in the sort of aggression, especially on the forehand side. And I first noticed that in Australia, right? I remember you or somebody, I don't know, we were in a space, we were like, hey, has she always been hitting her forehand like that? Because I don't remember it, right? I don't remember it being quite the weapon that it's turned into. Her
Mhm.
serve has even gotten better. Like, I'm like, she's 5'3", you
Yeah.
know? So here's what I'm gonna say. Now that I think about it, it actually makes some sense that she's doing well on grass. She has a low center of gravity. You can't mess with her like you can on clay by looping the ball up on her, right? Like,
Mhm.
the ball staying low is actually a good thing for her, right? And she can hit through it, right? So, I mean, now that I think about it, it makes sense that she's doing well on grass, but it just wasn't something that I imagined for her. Look, I did have her getting to the quarterfinals, and I had assumed she would lose to Coco. That match didn't happen. I honestly thought Navarro would beat her because she had the head to head, and I'm like, hey, if you taking out Naomi Osaka and Coco Gauff, then
You should be in fine, fine form.
should be in fine form to like I totally could see her losing the match, but I thought it would be tight,
Yes,
and
not
so
under an hour.
I just have to, and I didn't watch it, so you'll have to let me know what you saw,
You
but
didn't miss much.
but
But
what I
what we've talked about so far is what happened in that match. It was just it was a playground for Jasmine to be joyous, and Emma was kind of just like
But do you think
the C character.
she froze mentally about for the occasion? Because that performance just didn't make
She did.
sense
She
to me.
absolutely did. I think in succession, she reached the third round of Australia, and that was an event where she was seeded. That was her first time being seeded at a major. She reached the third round. She basically reached where she was supposed to. Roland Garros, she's again seeded and reaches the fourth round, again where she's kind of supposed to be.
Supposed to be, yeah.
I think something in getting to the last eight does change somebody's um mindset, or could change somebody's mindset, especially if you haven't been there before. And Emma has never been there before. And she kind of played like it. She played like, oh, wait, I am in a position to where, like, if I keep playing, this trophy could be in my hand. And you kind of saw that for all of the match, which,
Okay.
for entertainment purposes wasn't fun, but expected slash understandable, even
Yeah,
with
no.
all of the like resources that we don't. I'm not gonna get into the fact that she's inheriting billions in her life.
Yeah,
I can
yeah,
get
yeah,
into that,
yeah.
but even with all of that, you still have to have some level of kind of been there, done that. And Jasmine Paolini has been there and done that, and it's showcased all day. And Navarro kind of just looks stunned at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. I wondered whether she just kind of got overcome by the occasion a bit and couldn't really hit freely and play the kind of game that she wanted to play. So that's unfortunate, for us as fans, but from an experience, well, maybe not if you're a real fan of Paulini, which I am. But I think that we all thought we were going to get a much more competitive match there, and I think for me, this is definitely the second biggest shock of the day. Not so much that Paulini won, but just the manner in which she did.
Hmm. I'm with it, and now I'm excited to see where Paulini goes, not only in this tournament but for the rest of the season. Because hey, it might as well continue. She's already had one WTA 1000 victory. Get a bigger trophy, girl. Go do it.
Well, I definitely think she could be one of the favorites. I would put her as maybe even second or third non-EGA favorite for the Olympics at this point. Assuming that she's
Mm,
healthy,
mm,
right? It's going to be back on clay. It's just, she has great memories from just making the final.
and she
Um,
mentioned it in her speech. Yeah, like, okay, see you guys soon.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, she has great memories from making the final. I think we've got to put her up there. I mean, if she's literally done finals and semis in her last two major tournaments and, could still make the final here, frankly, could still win it.
Hmm.
So, like I actually would give her a better chance of winning Wimbledon than the French Open just because she won't, just because of the obstacle that Iga presents for her on
Hmm.
clay versus the fact that like the only person I could see running through her that's on the other side of the draw is Rybakina.
I was
And
hoping you said that because I had her picture pulled up.
yeah, yeah, no, I mean, that's the only person that I could see, like, making it from that other side of the draw that could put down, like, a 6-2, 6-3 on Jasmine, right? But
Mhm.
Jasmine also returns serve really well. And, I could see her if she can get into some of Rybakina's service games, I could, that could go either way. But I think that any of the other potential, once again, assuming she beats Vekic, which may very well not happen, but if she were to beat Vekic and make the final, I could see her being competitive against any of the other 3 women, frankly. I worry about her against Rybakina. I worry that could be a bit of a beat down if Rybakina's serve is on.
I'm not gonna take that route because,
Mhm,
Rybakina is not somebody I find myself, easily rooting for these days. Not well, I guess it is because of her personality, not because it, like, turns me off. Actually,
mhm,
no, I'm not. I'm just gonna say how I feel. It does in a little way. Like, her lack of her seeming lack of care. I know in some ways she has to give a shit about tennis because she's out there playing. So I don't question that. But the outward display of it is not what makes me turn on television. But all of that being said, putting back on my tennis commentator and moderator hat, she is the favorite to win Wimbledon now. She
yeah,
is. She's the clear favorite as the number 4 seed and highest seed woman remaining on the draw. I just don't look forward to the matches like
mhm,
her match tomorrow against Elena Svitolina. I
mhm.
think I'll watch that just to see what the outcome is, but I don't watch it with excitement in my belly.
Well,
Um, you
the
know,
funny thing is that I think that Svitolina is actually her biggest threat on that half of the draw. I think Svitolina can get into her service game. She's a good returner. She's gritty. Um, you know, um, that could be. I mean, here's my thing. If Rybakina rolls through Svitolina, I think she's
she's gonna keep on rolling.
yeah, yeah, yeah. If it's a tight match against Svitolina and she wins it, I then there could still be some question marks. But if she is able to just kind of roll through Elena, um, the way that she rolled through her last couple of matches, like I have a hard. I mean, I want to ask you just a quick tangential question.
hmm
Are you as concerned about how unbothered Sloane is, or is that a different kind of performance for you?
Sloane has had enough moments in her career that I can like put in my bookmarks in my mind, if you will, to know that it's there. Rabakina hasn't had nearly enough of those moments for me to even think that it's in there. Does that make sense? Do
Fair
I
enough. Yeah, fair
It
enough.
makes okay because I feel like I am in the world of. I feel like I'm delusional when I start talking about Rabakina because people are like, Miles, why don't you like her? Why don't you like it? I'm like, what is she giving me to like? Like,
So I do like her a lot. And I
mhm,
and I said that she kind of represents for introverts. I really think that I would play similarly to her.
mhm,
Mostly because I think as a black man, I know that any show of emotion would be interpreted in a weird way, which is what I think is happening with Felix. But that's another conversation for another day. But what I will say is that I know that when Black people show emotion, whether positive or negative, it's always interpreted differently, right? There's
mhm, mhm.
always a different valence to it, right? So I think that for me to avoid the mental energy of that, like I'd love if you could just be like a F you Serena like was and was just like, I'm just gonna be who I am and I don't care what these people are gonna say. Like I'd love for some people to have that attitude, but I just know for me personally, right? Like I know this from when I was playing junior and youth tennis. I was extraordinarily controlled on court with my emotions, right? Because I just knew that I was more likely to get a warning or, have a point penalty or something like that just because of like stereotypes that people have about black men being angry and aggressive, right? And
Mhm,
so
mhm.
I just, I feel like I would be a very now off the court I'd be screaming and crying, but on the court,
But I feel like she doesn't do that off the court or on the
but we
court.
don't
You
know. But we
maybe I
don't
need well,
know.
that's the WTA's fault because we don't get a picture of what she
Yeah,
is
exactly.
very
I
often
mean,
off the court.
we don't know. But yeah, look, I get that her personality is not for everyone. And I get that, to me, she has an unnecessarily hostile relationship with the tennis media, which, I
Mm,
understand why, because a lot of tennis media sucks, frankly. But I also get like, but at the same time, it's like, but girl, like, don't be messing around with your paycheck, like the media is part of creating the aura around you, which helps with your endorsement money, right?
Mm.
Like let's keep it real here for a second, right? So
Mhm.
I don't know if you want to segue into talking about what we think is gonna happen in the Rabakina Svitolina match,
For
or
for the interest of time,
mhm.
so we don't have like a super, super long live or
Yeah.
podcast, who do you think is going to win versus Rybakina and Svitolina?
I really want Rabakina to win. I'm not a huge Svitolina fan. I feel bad for what's happened to her and her country, but I've never been a huge fan of hers. I'm not like I don't dislike her, but
Mhm. She's just not on the radar. She's not
yeah,
putting
and
you in your top 5.
I just think Rabakina will give a better semifinal match and performance, whoever it is that she ends up playing, even if she loses that match. So I think Rabakina will win, but look, I absolutely would not be shocked if if Svitolina found a way. She's a wily veteran. She's
Mhm.
playing for more than herself at this point, right? Like she's really playing for her country in a particular kind of way. She's also I think partially like reliving the good vibes from last year,
Mhm.
right? So I look, I she's a veteran, she's had experience, like she could be, she could absolutely win this tournament, frankly, much less beat Rabakina. But I do think Rabakina will get through. And
Y
I would love to see that matchup with either Ostapenko or Krejcikova, but I'm a much bigger fan of Ostapenko's tennis.
Before we go to Ostapenko, I'll say this for the sake of not being as emotionally crushed as I was on past birthdays that fell my on ladies singles final day. I'm going to try to watch the remainder of Elena Rybakina's matches at Wimbledon without feeling and hoping for something to see that won't be there.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna try my best to just appreciate the ball striking and the good serving and see where that takes me. It might not take me very far away from the feelings I already have, but I'm just going to try and just absorb the tennis and lack of entertainment for what it is and just try to sit into the X's and O's of it all. Somebody hold me to this. I'll probably clip this up and put it on Twitter or
Okay.
something. I'm going to try. I'm going to try. Trying is important. Uh, okay. Let's go to the other women's quarterfinal tomorrow, which is Miss Yelena Ostapenko, 2017 French Open champion, versus Miss Barbora Krejcikova, 2021 French Open champion. I don't. Where do I put my feelings for this at Xavier? I can totally understand and accept the fact that Ostapenko can blow through a draw the way she's blown through this Wimbledon draw. Like that's just kind of her MO. Like she doesn't play around too much. She goes out there, sees ball, hits ball, gives you some feisty attitude, complains a lot, and that's the gist of what you get with Elena Ostapenko. So I'm not surprised in that way, but it happening now again is a little surprising to me because ever since 2017, it's been fits and starts, and I'm kind of expecting the stop to happen. But for some reason, this week I am not expecting it, and it may be because of the combination of her like having this little weird I don't want to call it a bromance because they're not brothers, but like this friendship with Lil Wayne via social media now. Maybe
Mhm.
I'm leaning into that, and just the whole fact that she's barely dropped games, that I think the same thing could happen in that match against Krejcikova. But Krejcikova is a different level of opponent than she's played in the past
Oh,
couple of rounds. So, you know.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, two things about Ostapenko that's interesting. I've always thought that she would catch fire and maybe win another slam before it was all said and done. I just, I just thought like, she's gonna catch that lightning in a bottle one more fortnight somewhere. I don't know where, maybe another French Open, maybe Wimbledon, maybe US, whatever. But I've always felt that way about her. I certainly didn't think she was even gonna beat Tomljanovic, honestly. Her first round opponent, Tomljanovic, I think, has a winning head-to-head with her, or it was even, like a 1-1.
Mhm.
And Tomljanovic had come in with more wins on the grass, in the warm-ups compared to Ostapenko, so I just was like, "I don't even think she's gonna get out of the first round, much less make it to that potential 4th round with Iga," right?
Mhm.
She has proved me all kinds of wrong with the way that she's been playing, this last couple of weeks, and I think Krejcikova will be a good test, right? Like, if she gets past Krejcikova, the problem is, though, she has a horrific record against Rybakina. Like,
Mm.
it's not good, right? So
Ostapenko, right? Ostapenko
yeah,
doesn't have a good record against Rybakina, yeah.
does not have a good record against Rybakina from what I remember. So that may be the end of the show for her if she gets past Krejcikova. Whereas, if Krejcikova wins, I think that'll be a bit more of a match, between Krejcikova and Rybakina. But once again, talk about someone kind of coming out of nowhere and catching
Mhm.
form all of a sudden. We now have Barbara Krejcikova kind of resurrecting herself. Like the one time I don't pick her to do anything, right? Because I've always picked her to kind of be that sneaky person who you kind of look up and all of a sudden she's in the quarters and you're like, "Oh, how did that happen?" Right?
Mhm.
But she wasn't thinking she was going to do that this time around. I've seen a couple of her matches. She's playing well. You know, um she's
Mhm.
playing well.
There's
She's
there's
playing
a smoothness that she plays with that the smoothness is out for those to see it and who aren't privy or maybe have forgotten about how smooth her game is. Oh wait, where'd I put you at? Yikes, wrong thing. There we go. there's a smoothness to Krejcikova's game that's out on full display, and I think it'll be interesting to see the juxtaposition of Ostapenko being. Actually, Ostapenko is smooth in her own way, but she attacks the ball in a much different way than Krejcikova attacks the ball. Krejcikova kind of massages it, and it goes where she wants it to go with depth, and Ostapenko lashes at it, and
yeah.
it goes kind of in her mind where she thinks it wants to go, but sometimes it just goes wherever the ball is going that day. So
Yeah,
it'll be
no.
interesting to watch that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in how that's going to turn out. Um, because I do think that look, Ostapenko leads that head to head. So my expectation would be that my expectation would be that it'll end up being a Yelena Elena semifinal.
Hmm.
Um, but I wish I could be a little more confident about that, to be honest with you. Actually, the Rybakina Ostapenko head to head isn't that horrible. It's 3-2.
Ah, where'd
Yeah,
you
so
pull
that's
that one from?
I just literally pulled it up off of the WTA website.
No, I wonder how you thought that Ostapenko had a bad head to head. Were you thinking about Azarenka?
I don't know. I just thought I had heard someone. I think what it was is I heard someone else mention it. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why I was like, "Oh, yeah, she doesn't have a great record against her." And then I just was like, "Let me look that up and make sure I'm not just saying shit." Excuse my
Let's
language.
just be happy that people are mentioning tennis. Period. How about that? Let's.
Yeah,
let's, let's
yeah, so I looked it up and I was like, "Oh, actually, that's a competitive head-to-head." So,
hmm.
let's not count Ostapenko out just yet, because
I hope I
especially if
haven't jinxed her.
yeah, but if she rolls through or plays similar level to what she's been able to do against Krejcikova, that's serious. Like if you can beat
Yeah,
Krejcikova in straight sets, that means that your game is up
it's
here.
hitting its stride. It's hitting its stride. Somebody else who's hitting their stride and has. I don't want to say, yeah. I'll go on record and say that Taylor Fritz has reinvigorated me in believing in the Taylor Fritz of it all because going back to when I had media credentials in Dallas and Delray Beach, I saw him win at Delray Beach, and I wasn't. I didn't leave there thinking that Taylor Fritz would ever win a major. Let's just put it clearly. For some reason, I don't know if it's the extra. I think it actually is the extra chip on his shoulder that he's had this week, thanks to Arthur Rinderknech
Mhm,
and a little bit of a push from Alexander Zverev.
mhm.
I actually think the stars could align for him, and I'm looking at it just in the scope of this tournament. Don't hold this against me when we get to the U.S. Open and forward and forward. But at this Wimbledon, he's making me believe that one, he can break the quarterfinal barrier because he plays Lorenzo Musetti next, and that the winner of that is going to get into their first Grand Slam final period. So he set himself up for me to believe that he can crack one ceiling. I wouldn't be surprised if he cracks the. Well, actually, no. Wait, hold on. I'm going to ahead of myself because the winner of Musetti and Fritz has to take on the winner of Demonor and Djokovic.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Maybe Miles, you've gone a step too far. I just think Taylor Fritz can win the match against Musetti, and he's reinvigorated why I was kind of big on him after that Indian Wells 2022 win and his 2022 season on the tour. It wasn't great at the major so much, but on the tour, he really, really showed me that he's got the goods to hang with these guys. And I kind of forgotten about that a little bit. It kind of got a little monotone and it kind of got monotonous. He was going to win the 250s, but this past week and a half has instilled some more faith in the Taylor Fritz camp for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I personally do not find the game particularly inspiring. But look, I appreciate anybody who is clearly working hard to improve,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when you look at Taylor Fritz, you can see that he's very well aware of his athletic limitations, but he does the best that he can with what he has, and, I personally feel that, he's not the most interesting watch for me. And so, but I also personally feel that like ultimately the athleticism is going to be a problem in best of five against somebody really elite, which is what he would likely face in a semifinal or final of a major. And so
Mm-hmm.
I yeah, I don't think he's anyone who's ever going to win a slam, although I'd be here for it if he does, because I think that would help American tennis in a certain kind of way, and I think bring more positive attention on the sport that I feel
Mm-hmm.
like is lacking here in the US
Yeah.
right now. So look, and I agree with you. He seems to have shown me a little something extra. I still worry about, the fact that I still don't think he really has a great transition or net game, and I just don't see how you're winning Wimbledon without those things these days.
Mm-hmm.
And I do wish he was a better returner. He's an okay return. He's a good returner. It's not trash returning, but if he were a better returner, I feel like that could make up for some of the lack of net game and transition game. But ultimately, I am going to actually pick the upset. I think that Musetti is going.
Really?
Yeah, I really do. I've watched a lot of Lorenzo Musetti these last few weeks because I watched a lot of the tune-ups, and I always thought, you know what, that return of serve on that one-handed backhand is just going to be such a weakness that can be exploited by anyone who has a decent serve,
Mm-hmm.
much less someone with a serve of the quality of Taylor Fritz's. Um, but I just got to a point where I've been watching him over and over again, and he has developed a really great block return, right?
Mm.
This is the thing that Stan always had, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is the thing that I feel like Tsitsipas lacks, which is part of why he struggles on faster surfaces, because I just don't understand how he's not developed this after all these years. But we're not talking about Tsitsipas right now. Musetti has developed a great block return. So he's able to kind of get himself into these return games in a way that I don't think he traditionally is able to. He's not traditionally a particularly great returner of serve. His statistics for breaking serve are traditionally quite low. But he's been doing really well on the grass season, and I think it's because he's developed this really great block return that basically on the grass stays low, gives you no pace. And it seems to, I mean, it absolutely worked brilliantly against Impechi Pericard. And I just think if you can beat that serve, I don't think he'll be afraid of Taylor's serve. And so look, I would love for Fritz to win because I think it would be such a great story for US media and for the way that the tournament will be covered here.
Mhm.
I'm actually hoping he does win. But my analyst hat just says that Musetti just has the touch. He has the net game. He's playing great defense and keeping himself in points. That transition game is beautiful. The volleys look great. That slice is slicing. It's coming together. It's coming together.
You have mentioned everything about Lorenzo's game that is aesthetically beautiful. And I agree with you. He is an easy watch. He has all the skills that you think, especially now that he's developed some of the things like the backhand block return that you would imagine would go hand in hand with athleticism and traditional tennis on grass. But I raise you the fact that one, this is his first time in a Grand Slam quarter, and two, he has developed quite a mentality in his mind and also in my mind that he is a good match provider. Like he's great to have on the other side of the net to give you an incredibly fun match to watch. But he does not go to the net as the winner of those incredible matches often. And I think he's developed a little bit of scar tissue now of being on the other side of that. That if he gets himself in a position where Taylor Fritz just doesn't show up and Musetti has found himself in a comfortable position to get to his first semifinal, I would not put it out of the question that we see some of that mental baggage start to show. He
Fair.
needs to he needs to either like dominate from the very beginning and keep that. Actually, for in my mind, how I analyze it, that's the only way I can see him winning, unless it becomes like an epic battle for your first semifinal. Which, now that I say that, I actually kind of want it to be this epic battle for your first Grand Slam semifinal. But knowing what I know about Musetti, those epic battles do not fall in his favor.
So
So
yeah, and I think I'll just say that he seems to have found something the last few weeks though, right?
maybe
Like
maybe being a father.
yeah, he seems to have found something. Like he's been winning some close matches that in the past I feel like he would have lost. He's been finishing off some matches in four that I think would have become messy setters in
Mm,
the
mm,
past. He's been doing the things that I didn't think he could do over the last few weeks. And so I also just think, here's what I'm going to say. And I don't know anything about this, and I don't want to become an armchair psychologist. Like, I literally know nothing about what's going on in the heads of these guys. And so I
mhm,
hate to be armchair psychologist. But the sense I get, honestly, is that Musetti is just having the time of his life. He's playing above his expectations. And I just think he's going to come out loose because I think he's kind of happy to be there, wasn't expecting this, is kind of overperforming, and I think is happy with whatever that outcome is. Right. Whereas I think Taylor is going to have a lot of pressure. He's the only one of his friend group who's never made a semi at a.
mhm,
All of the others have done that. Um, he's carried that number one American thing without really producing those results at the slams. I think there's a lot of pressure on him. I think there's a lot of pressure on him. I think he will put a lot of pressure on himself to actually make this. And I think the fact that he's finally not getting Djokovic or Nadal,
mhm.
is really going to weigh on his mind, right? Like
Hmm.
because it's like, I actually should, like, both by seeding and by
Mhm.
reputation, he should win this. And so I just wonder, what does that being the favorite do to him um in a moment where he really wants this? Does he want it too much?
We shall see on the next episode of Wimbledon Championships 2024. Because now you really legit made me think about. There's a lot riding on this match. There really is.
For
Like
both of them.
for
Yeah.
both of them, I think Musetti it is a semifinal puts him closer into the conversation of competitive with Sinner and Alcaraz, like he was always in at the very beginning before any of them had slams. A semifinal to Grand Slam puts him closer to being back in that conversation credibly. Whereas Fritz, a win also puts him in a more credible conversation of a potential Grand Slam champion and a real threat to lift the biggest trophies again. But if he loses it, it hypes up the noise that he's just at his ceiling, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Actually,
No.
kind of for both of them. And if both whoever loses this, depending on how that loss goes, it could formulate where their ceilings are in their careers. I'm interested to see what happens in that matchup
Yeah.
a lot more now.
I honestly think it's a lot more important for Taylor than Lorenzo, simply because Lorenzo's been playing so poorly this year. And I
Mm,
really, really think that he is happy with this result, right? Like either way. Um,
hmm
Whereas I think for Taylor it would be like, oh, not again. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So I really think that like no one was thinking Musetti was going to be making a deep run at Wimbledon, despite
I mean, he did have that run at Queen's Club. True.
he did, but given where he was ranked, it meant his draw was going to be, it wasn't like he was coming in as a top 10 seed or whatever. So he had it was a tricky draw that he made it through, to his credit. So yeah, I don't know. I think, look, I'm playing a bit of psychology, but I'm gonna go with that gut instinct. But I would love to be proven wrong, because I do, as I said, think Fritz making the semis will be a boon to the way that the tournament is covered, and it will bring an attention back to tennis that we haven't had. I would argue since maybe Shelton's breakout year.
Mm, mm. Let's see what happens. Now I have talked myself up to circle that match. I was gonna watch it, but like now I'm interested, and now I've put the pressure on both. We've put the pressure on both of them for them to give us a classic quarterfinal. Okay, the last quarterfinal we haven't talked about. We've kind of talked around it, and I want to give us like maybe 65, 70 seconds talking
Okay,
about it max,
perfect.
because it could be a complete dump, giving now what we know, or potentially kind of sort of know about Novak Djokovic's opponent in this quarterfinal, Alex de Minaur, who's had a great grass court season. He picked up a title in Nottingham or Birmingham. No, the
No,
Netherlands.
he won
The Netherlands.
her title
Yeah.
match.
He picked up a title of 250 in the Netherlands. He's shown great comfortability or being able to be comfortable on grass before, but in his last match against Arthur Fee, he shout out to Arthur Fees, by the way. Um, he came up short, and he had a very distinct look on his face that it kind of like he knew something was wrong. It remains to be seen how he's going to pull up in that match, but even still, all things considered, Djokovic is the heavy favorite with his uh, game, just his natural good game, his history at Wimbledon, and the fact that he's now apparently made it a mission, yet again, to silence the crowd and show everybody who's the real boss, and tell everybody that he can't, that he's not. What did he say in that on the court? You guys can't harm me, or you guys can't take me, or you guys, something along those lines of like kind of brushing the imaginary haters off. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm probably hater number one, but in that Wimbledon crowd, they were pretty imaginary on that day.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about this quarterfinal, just because
Fine with me.
I honestly wouldn't have picked De Minaur even at his healthiest.
Mm,
And I would have picked De Minaur if there was a situation where Djokovic had been tested a bit physically, right? Like I was, my whole thing was like, if he doesn't, if can he hold up, right? Because you know that even if the knee is okay, there's still the physicality of 3 out of 5 that that he has to build up that muscle memory for.
hmm
Um, so I was really thinking Djokovic was going to win this regardless, but now that there's a potential injury question, that to me just makes it even more likely that he'll win it. And as I said, look, I think De Minaur's best bet, and I know this may not be what he wants to hear, but I would be like to keep the old man out there, right?
hmm
As long as you can, right? Like don't let him win it easily in straight sets, right? Like if you can keep him out there and it gets into a fifth set, maybe your fitter, younger body might be able to get through that, right? Like you might be able to fatigue him because he hasn't had a lot of, tough physical matches so far. So that's the only thing. And we've seen him struggle in those matches earlier this year, where it felt like, I don't know if it were mental or physical or a combination of both, but it just felt like he wasn't all the way there when he was really pushed. I'm thinking about that, even that Fritz match, it
hmm
felt like he was
At
struggling.
Australia earlier this year. I
Yeah,
mean, the only thing I want to see Djokovic push is somebody pushing him out of the tournament. Sorry. Like, I want to see that. Diminor, if you have to be out there for 5 hours and sacrifice everything, even a potential win in your first Grand Slam semi if you beat Djokovic, I urge you to consider that because um, this Novak hater does not want to see Novak win another Wimbledon title. Sorry. I know I should have like my tennis commentating, broadcaster, journalist, whatever hat on, but I'm also a fan at my core, and I want to see fun tennis on championship weekend. And Djokovic hasn't provided that for me in quite a while. So
Yeah,
there we are.
no, fair enough. I mean, I'm with you. We've come,
We
our
commiserated.
agreement, yeah, about that. I mean, I'm kind of hoping that he wins the Olympics and calls it quits.
Hey, yeah,
But
yeah. Let's look at it that way.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't think that's, I don't actually think that's going to happen. But yeah, I don't see a scenario. As I said, even a fully fit and fully healthy Demon Hour, I just didn't see a scenario whereby I could see him taking a set. I could even see him taking two, but I just can't see him taking three. Look, if he proves me wrong, all the better for him, and I'll definitely be rooting for him to potentially make the final then. But I think we're also put, look, if Djokovic goes out, I think we are getting a somewhat lopsided final.
Hmm.
Whoever that is. I mean, I don't know, maybe if it's Medvedev, it could be a little more interesting, but yeah. So, I think there's something to think about as far as from a fan perspective on like what Championship Sunday looks like. It
Looks
seems like
like.
it would be a more intriguing match if Djokovic is in that final. Um, but if maybe both of Carlos and Djokovic get upset and it's like a Medvedev Musetti final or something like that, it could be that could be very interesting, right? But I fear the lopsidedness of the draw if Djokovic goes out, and just thinking that Medvedev and Alcaraz are just kind of a step ahead of the guys on
Hmm.
the other side of the draw right now.
Hmm.
And so I worry that we might end up with not a non-eventful Saturday and Sunday,
But
potentially.
I raise you. We could end up with a non-eventful Sunday, even if Djokovic is still in the final. So
That is true. That is true. But I just have a hard time imagining Djokovic not at least taking a set in the final. I mean,
he couldn't do it against Andy Murray.
that
That
is true, but that was early. That was
was
early.
a decade ago plus. I know. I know.
Yeah,
I
that was early Djokovic when he was still figuring, he was still figuring some things out. But I get your point, but it's been a long time since someone's been able to take out Novak in straight sets in the final. I mean, I know Medvedev did
At
it.
any Grand Slam
Yeah,
comfortably. Like it's been a while since somebody just comfortably been like, okay, I win, you lose, kind of thing
yeah,
with
yeah.
Djokovic.
So I don't see that happening. I think that he'll at least make it a competitive match, even if he doesn't win it, And so there's that. But I mean, I think if it's well, look, if there are a couple of different upsets and we get a kind of unexpected final, I think that could be fun. But I just think if Carlos makes it through and he's going up against anyone other than Djokovic, I don't see a Carlos De Minaur match on grass being particularly competitive. I think he has too much athleticism for Fritz, unfortunately.
Hmm.
And I just think he has too much experience for Musetti. Like I just don't think those would be particularly compelling competitive matches.
Fair
Um,
enough.
but we'll see, right? And I could be proven wrong. So
We'll
let's hope so.
we shall see. And I'm seeing some love in the comments from Melissa. Melissa says, "Love your spaces and match analysis, Miles." Thank you so much, Melissa. She also says, "Go Carlito." So we know who she's rooting for to win this Wimbledon championship again. And I agree, Melissa. Before we wrap this up, uh, parting thoughts. You put something in our shared note
Yeah.
system, Mr. Xavier, that I think the people listening would like to hear us expound on. Feel free to lead that charge.
Yeah, I just, I always like to ask you, Miles, like who your surprise of the tournament is. Someone that you just maybe didn't have your finger on, but they kind of they've surprised you with how well they performed. And then I don't normally ask you for disappointment, so you're welcome to skip that if you'd like.
I
But
shan't.
but I'm also interested in who you think has been a bit of a disappointment, and maybe if you could name a player from both the men's and women's side, if you have one.
On the men's side, I don't know if you know what? Because it's on the tip of my tongue, and it just came to me. I'll go with it. I'm disappointed by Tsitsipas, not because I'm like finding myself as a super fan that's disappointed he didn't get the results, but I'm disappointed that similar to what we were talking about with Musetti just a couple minutes ago, he hasn't done the things required of his game to tool them for grass or to tool them pretty much for the second half of the season. And it looks like it's going to be several years in a row where it's just clay that he kind of excels on, maybe a run at Australia. But that is disappointing to me, especially from a guy that was talked about as the leader of the next gen. So I'm disappointed that his game has really stagnated in the past couple years. It's not like I'm not like deeply disappointed, but I do think his game at an elite level where he's kind of soaring in the mix is fun to watch, but it just hasn't been there outside of Monte Carlo for the past couple of years to me. So that's disappointing. On the women's side, I'm a little disappointed that Jing Can Win
Mm,
hasn't taken that Australian Open final to at least more respectable results thereafter. She lost to Lulu Sun, who, I mean, in hindsight, in the past week and a half, that loss has looked great because Lulu Sun took it all the way to the quarterfinals and maybe the next superstar of women's tennis. Who knows? But Jin Kinwin had at least a little momentum coming into Wimbledon. And in the past 6 months, she's been a top 10 player based off that Australian Open run. She's had some good tests with Naomi Osaka and won both of them. So I was disappointed to see her go out as early as she did. And I'm starting to wonder if her tennis, as big and as fun as it is to watch, is going to be sustainable. So that's a disappointment for me. And if I can do like a point 0.5 disappointment on the women's side, I was very disappointed with what happened with Coco in that match with Emma Navarro. I just thought that I guess I shouldn't have thought that because she literally is only 20 years old. I thought she had matured out of those kind of performances where it seems like things go haywire and she has no idea what to do to kind of slow them down. But that's exactly what happened. Her game wasn't up to snuff like it had been for the past 3 rounds, and things went haywire. And she just kind of allowed them to with the talking to her box and asking for things that they weren't giving her. And it kind of just all crumbled, which, you know, it's human. It happens. We have bad days. But I was just disappointed in seeing it, especially considering that Iga had already gone out, Sabalenka had withdrawn, and Coco was the number 2 seed and had won a slam and could have potentially added a Wimbledon. So that was disappointing. Um
Look, Miles, I'm gonna say
Surprises.
I always think that forehand grip is always gonna be a problem on grass for her. You know, no matter how well she's playing, she's gonna always have to problem solve because of that grip. But yes.
Mm.
But look,
I was
others
gonna I was gonna take us into the conversation there, but I won't do it today.
okay, yeah, we can leave that alone. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'm interested to who your surprises are because I don't think actually I have a surprise, and you tell me first who your surprises are.
You know what? I don't have many, but I tried to think of who it would be, and I definitely think on the women's side is Lulu's son, right? I just had no
Hmm.
idea who this person was, and I hadn't really even watched her play. And then when I actually saw her play, I was like, oh, it's kind of Kerber-ish, you know. There's
Why do
a
we do that? Why do we do that to our lefties? We got to find somebody else to equate them to besides Kerber.
but she does play a lot like
Just for
Kerber.
me, just for me.
But the funny thing is that she does. I mean, you know, I think there's a more powerful serve than Angie ever had. And I think Angie's ultimately a bit better of a mover. But Lulu's son, I mean, that was just a revelation. I think she has a fun game. There's a Kvitovic. It's a little mix between a Kvitova and a Angie, you know, that's going
Hmm.
on with her. But you know, because definitely not as powerful as Kvitova. But yeah, I thought she's just turned out to be, as far as like just someone I had literally never really heard of before the tournament, and therefore like I think a very pleasant surprise. On the men's side, I'm gonna go for two people, and it's Impechi Pericard and Feast. Um
You stole who exactly I was gonna say because
yeah,
I
and
didn't. I didn't think either of them were going to have like they're like opening the door to a broader audience party at Wimbledon this year. I didn't think it
No,
was
not
going to happen
at
for
all.
either of them.
That was a very pleasant surprise. I mean, and Petchy Pericard getting into the draw, I was like, okay, I don't think he's going to beat Corda, but if he does, that draw kind of opens up for him a little bit. And that's exactly what he did. And, he showed great, I don't, there's great promise there. So I hope he continues to develop his game. Feast has that forehand thing too, right? Like he has a fairly weird grip. I think it's more of a clay court grip, right? Um, and so I always thought grass was going to be really hard for him. Um, and he was all right in the warm ups, like not really doing anything special. So I was just kind of like wasn't expecting much from him. I really wasn't sure he was going to even get out of his first or second round, if I recall.
Hmm.
So for me, for him to make it to the quarters and actually give Demonar a match for a little bit, there. I mean, I know a lot of people said he didn't play well for the first two sets of
Fourth
that.
round, right? That was his
That was
first
fourth
fourth round in a
round.
major.
Yeah, but his first
Hmm.
second week at a major certainly didn't think it would come at Wimbledon of all.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's turned out to be my surprise. So those are my surprises. I'll put Son on the or Soon, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, on the women's side, and my boys GMP and Feast on the men's side.
GNP. I love that nickname for Giovanni Impesci Pericard. GMP, not GNP Miles. GMP. And Arthur Feast has such a smooth name and a smooth game that it's kind of hard to mix that up. But I'm very thrilled for both of them. I hope they can take this and realize that they have the the games and the belief. And honestly, in my mind, this might not be true, but I can imagine that there's some people in the locker room that are kind of shook. Like, oh, like okay, here's some new talent that really hasn't been kind of super talked about. Like maybe there's been groups of people that have talked about fees and Pericard, but now it's kind of like you kind of have to put them in the conversation now of young 20 somethings. I mean, Giovanni, I think turns 21 on today, maybe.
I think he
I think it's
actually,
yesterday.
yeah, he turned
Yesterday was the
21 on the day of the Musetti match that he lost.
gotcha. So
He's
yeah, they're and both of them are 21 and younger. Feast
Yeah.
just turned 20 this year, somewhere about there. But yeah, I'm excited for both of them. I really hope they don't watch too much of their black French brethren, Monfils and Sangha. Like watch their highlights, but not their beatdowns.
Yeah,
Not
I
their
mean,
beatdowns.
I've always thought that they were very different, Songa and Monfils.
Very.
I always felt like Monfils mentally should have played a lot more aggressively with his athletic gifts, and his
Hmm.
choice to be such a defensive player throughout much of his career meant that he couldn't win a slam. I'm just gonna
Hmm.
say that. With Songa, I always thought that his issue was he just couldn't keep himself healthy. It was like
Fair.
physical stuff all the time with him, right? But yeah, look, I mean, I think right now both of them would love to make a Grand Slam semi like Monfils has, or a final like Songa has. So I still think right now those are emulate to uh, what do you call it, aspirational for them. But I hope their aspirations move beyond
And higher.
and higher than Monfils and Songa. And look, I think Impechi Pericard will always be limited because of the return of serve, because of like he's once you get him into a rally, it's and get that rally going for more than 4 or 5 shots, I think there'll be a ceiling to his game, but I think Feast, if he develops his game fully, absolutely should eventually make the top 10 and challenge for a slam here or there. But he needs to develop that game fully, of course.
I'm with it. I'm with being on the boat for both GMP and Arthur Feast because I just want to see what happens for them. They're easy routes when it comes to me, and I'm sure I know based off this conversation you feel the same. And based off this conversation, I'm looking at the quarterfinals and the rest of the Wimbledon tournament a lot differently than I would have an hour and a half ago. So I thank you for that, Xavier. You have an ability to come on to either my Twitter spaces or literally tuned into tennis, the YouTube platform or podcast or whatever I ultimately upload this as. And really make me look at things from a different tennis perspective. And for that, I really, really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you once again for the conversations. I really love the platform that you give for us, especially as fans, to talk about the sport. And I really appreciate that you mix in us fans with the, the real journalists and the real commentators. It makes your platform very unique. And that mix of uh, fans and people who are more institutional is a nice mix. And so I hope you're able to keep that going, because it's great, just as a fan to be able to come on a podcast and chat. It's fun. So I appreciate the platform you created. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now I'm gonna take that and like put it on my bookmarks and and just hopefully see it grow, because that's the goal here. But we have done our good chatting for a while, and I think it's a good time to stop here and get ourselves rested and ready for the I guess the second half of Wimbledon, where it really is down to the nitty gritty, and we're gonna have somebody holding some trophies in a couple of days. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to see who those people are. I know you are too. Thank you again for coming on to the show, Xavier. Thank you guys that have been engaging in the comments and watching on YouTube and or Twitter Spaces. Thanks for following Tune Into Tennis. Make sure to go out on YouTube and subscribe. Like this video. If you're watching right now and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the notification bell. I know all of that is kind of cringy YouTuber stuff, but hey, it's what we got to do. Okay, if you want to support, that's the easiest and freest way to support. Share this video if you enjoyed some of the content and commentary. And with all of that being said, I will catch you on the next episode. Thanks again, Xavier, and everybody take care.